Hello, I'm Bob the Booker and welcome to my channel. And today I just wanted to talk a little bit about the books that I've been reading this week. I've been mostly in Booker mode, and so I won't go into all the Booker ones here because they'll have separate videos, and quite frankly, I'm not necessarily tired of talking about the Booker. There's just a lot of Booker right now. So let's talk about some other books instead, and let's talk about them here. First up, a book that's a fun new release and also ties in quite nicely with August being Women in Translation Month, and that is Mammoth by Ava Baltasar and translated by Julia Sanches. And I've really enjoyed the other two books in this sort of triptych she's called them. They're sort of connected but not. The characters are different, but they follow similar themes, particularly sort of women in their 20s who are somewhat isolated or choose to isolate themselves and have a lot of kind of complicated conversations with themselves about particularly having children, about their future, about all these other things. And so Mammoth, following on from Permafrost and Boulder, does some really, I think this is just brilliant. I love the way she writes. So the idea is there is this woman who just disappears off. I'm laughing just because of how absurd parts of this book are. But the beginning part of this book is her really investigating the idea of potential motherhood. And so she starts... it opens with just an incredible line, which I'll read to you because I just think it's brilliant. On the day I planned to get pregnant, I turned 24 and threw a birthday party that was actually a fertilization party in disguise. And in many ways, that gives you a sense for what the rest of this book is like. So this opening part is really her exploring this idea of motherhood and kind of deciding against it and deciding that she wants to do it and then kind of deciding against again. Quite a few kind of complicated conversations with herself as part of that. She then sort of chooses to isolate herself and moves to a farm where she sort of has this odd life with a dog that's kind of adopted her. She lives next to a farmer who is quite sort of aloof and doesn't really talk to her much. But she sort of has this almost this sort of self-destructive drive at times. And it's sort of interesting because her as a figure, she occasionally throws herself into danger, but then also flips around and throws herself into the most sort of self-protective behaviors that she can as well. So she's sort of really constantly going between these two giant poles of kind of existence. And I found her utterly captivating as a character. But I think what sells it even better is the book is such a... it's so wild and absurd at times, but equally, at the same time, it has something of real heft and real weight to it. It's really poignant, actually, in talking about sort of this woman's life, about kind of a sense of safety, particularly safety as a woman, kind of complications around motherhood, yes or no, and without spoiling anything about how this book ends, I think it really builds just this absolutely stunning and kind of shocking and heartbreaking kind of conclusion that is just so well observed in so few pages. It's sort of, it's already, it's a book that's just a smidge over 100 pages. But even in that last couple of pages, she does so much in such a short space of time that I had to go back and reread to just check that I hadn't missed something, because she just very quickly moves a certain part of the plot along and something happens and then the book ends. I think this is a really stunning piece of writing and reminds me of why I loved Boulder so much as well. Permafrost I also really enjoyed. I think this is just such an interesting triptych of three very short novels that all just do so much and really explore this. And I think there are a lot of parallels with her, with the author's real life, apparently, in terms of where she lived or kind of some of the decisions she made. But this is sort of that on steroids and is sort of almost a thought experiment of taking some of those things to their extremes. I think this is such a brilliant piece of writing, and I just really enjoyed it. Next, very different indeed, I read Patterflash by Adam Lowe. And this is a collection of poems that was longlisted for the Polari Prize, which I really greatly enjoyed. It sort of explores quite a lot of things about identity and language, particularly a sort of almost the kind of lost gay male identities of kind of the time of Polari, and various other things. So it does this sort of, some of the poems are written in a sort of hybrid of Polari and Standard English. Others sort of use modern kind of queer slang. Others sort of play around with other bits of language, and it's just a really playful and intriguing and fun set of poems, and I really greatly enjoyed it. I think it does a lot of, yeah, it feels like a really playful and sexy and funny, but also very serious and thoughtful, and heartfelt book that really kind of focuses on a lot of aspects around the community, and particularly what is kind of, yeah, the sort of histories that we've lost in some ways, but how those histories sort of live on and sort of are still very much around us now as well. And last but not least, I read Rural, The Lives of the Working Class Countryside by Rebecca Smith. Longlisted for another prize, or shortlisted actually, for the Wainwright Prize around nature writing. But in this, Rebecca Smith does something really quite interesting, of something I've never really considered before. So she looks at the working class people who live in neighborhoods around sort of big rural countryside areas, and she speaks right at the beginning right at the beginning of this book about how it's so often perceived that you must be so lucky living in the countryside, and it must be so pretty and all these other things. But she charts a bit of a history about how much things have changed. So when she started living in the sort of in the earlier days of being in the countryside, years ago, that would have been very much a thing of a wealthy landowner who owns the estate and does all these and kind of provides these jobs for these sort of working class folk, and the conditions might not be great, and there might be a lot of other things that are quite problematic about it, about not really ever owning the land, about never really being there properly, and all these other things. And she charts a bit of a line from that to what's happening now. So she sort of, in various waypoints along the way when she's talking, she speaks about things like New Lanark, which is now a UNESCO site in the UK, in Scotland, a bit just outside of Glasgow, and it was sort of a mill, a kind of a cotton mill, and it was almost a town built for the workers that was sort of built around this sort of land, and sort of basically with the idea of being that workers would have this really good space to live in. It would be a way of really looking after the workers and all these other things. But she charts how that thing has sort of changed. So actually now a lot of people are growing up in the countryside who could not ever afford to live there unless they'd been born there. That many people are being priced out of the areas they grew up in. Many people are these jobs have sort of disappeared, not only because of sort of industrialization, but also some of the landowners themselves have kind of said, well, actually, we're going to remove the need to have some of these jobs. And I think this book does something really interesting in kind of unpicking this sort of, supposed idyllic lifestyle of, you work in the land and you live in the countryside and everything's glorious, is a lot more problematized than we think it is. It is very much a lifestyle that you have to choose, but knowing that you might never really make much money, that you might be in sort of difficult financial circumstances if anything goes wrong. But she also does talk about the real joy of it, that there's a way of, the people who kind of come together, and the ways that people understand each other and their lives. It's a very loud car. That people understand themselves and their lives is so sort of it's so tied into the land that it's this sort of really difficult thing where it's both the most glorious thing that you are in the countryside and you're doing this, but also you are to some degree, not necessarily trapped there, but it, financially it can be incredibly tricky to stay in that place, but also it can be financially tricky to leave and do something else. So there's this very odd dynamic for everybody involved. So I thought it was a really interesting book. So those are the books I've been reading this week. I hope you are having a wonderful week. Hope things are going really well. I'm still very much in booker mode, so I'm still reading a few of the long lists, including Wandering Stars, which just arrived from the library today. And so, yeah, I'm going to be reading a fair few of those. I'll be trying to squeeze in other books around them as well, partly for my sanity, and also partly just so that my weekly reads isn't just, here is half the book a long list. But anyway, take care, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Bye bye.